I had gone through college and law school and kind of drifted away from church going, and was in the more questioning and rebellious phase of adolescent malehood. And in my first year at law school at Harvard, I just realized that I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and that I should take some time off to figure it out before I just went through the 3 years of law school rushing. So I wrote to the Jesuits in Honduras that I had worked with, that I had visited 7 years before, and said, I'd like to come down and just be a volunteer with you. And they wrote back and said, we'd love to have you. So I took a year off of Harvard Law School in the 1980-81 and went to Honduras and worked with Jesuit missionaries in El Progreso, Honduras, which is near San Pedro Sula. Some of you might be familiar with the country. And they put me in charge of a school that taught kids to be welders and carpenters. My dad was an iron worker, had an ironworking shop. And it was just an amazing experience. And I would say the influence of my parents, the influence of my Jesuit teachers, and then especially that year in Honduras really put me on a very definite path. By the time I came back to law school, I was really focused on using my legal career to benefit the least of these. I got very much engaged in Catholic worship again in Honduras, and when I came back and since. And that Honduras experience is something that I think about pretty much every day. I have a wonderful parish in Richmond. I go to a Catholic parish, St. Elizabeth's, that my wife and I were married at 28 years ago, and we're very, very involved in it. It's a small parish, kind of in the inner city of Richmond, but it's been a real wonderful faith home. And I just credit my Honduras experience with sort of reconnecting me with the notion that communal worship, individual prayer is important, but communal worship is also really, really important to a strong faith life, and my time in Honduras kind of made me realize that. It is the case. I mean, I think we all grapple with it in our personal lives too. So as a husband and father, and as an attorney, I mean, I would grapple with issues of congruence between my life and my faith. But the thing that's been the sharpest, and it's been very, very difficult in life, is I do accept the Church's teachings about the sanctity of life with respect to both abortion and the death penalty. Now, I think that there are moral issues, and it's not necessarily the role of government to make folks moral decisions for them, but in terms of the way you live, I definitely accept my Church's teachings. Well, that posed a real challenge for me as a statewide official because of Virginia having the death penalty, and not just having the death penalty, but we're one of the states that in recent history has used it the most. When I ran for lieutenant governor, it was a little bit of an issue, but not much of one. Folks don't pay that much attention to lieutenant governor's race. So, but when I ran for governor, suddenly it was a very big issue, and I have always maintained that I believe in the teachings of my church, but I also know what it is to take an oath to uphold the law, and that upholding oaths is also a virtue. It's also a moral thing that's good to do. It's good to have a form of government where it's not just the whim of the leader, but rules and laws are applied and respected. But it was difficult during the campaign, but then it was very difficult as governor. So as governor, I wrestled with death penalty issues in a number of ways, trying to be true to my oath, but also true to myself, and spending some sleepless nights wrestling with that. There were probably about 11 or 12 executions scheduled when I was governor, people whose legal appeals had been exhausted, and there were executions scheduled. I intervened in a few from a timing standpoint. If somebody had an appeal that hadn't been resolved, I commuted one death sentence for a reason that I thought was compelling, but I allowed 10 or 11 executions to occur, believing that, I had said I would uphold the law and I needed to, but it was very, very difficult. When you have the power to make the decision, I could just, on my own whim, say, no, I'm going to block this execution, should I do it? And I really struggle with that. Mm-hmm. And in one instance, I mean, as if, I was really going to be tested on my belief about the oath I had taken, just in a weird quirk of coincidence. The individual who was being executed was somebody whose mother I knew quite well. Mm. And so obviously family members and others make appeals to you to exercise clemency. And in that case, it was not a case that had factors suggesting clemency, and I decided that the fact that I knew the family wasn't reason enough, given that there weren't factors there. So I still, those were very, very difficult decisions. what I tried to do to be true to my principles is that the legislature passed many bills expanding the death penalty when I was governor, probably 25 or 30. And I always vetoed those expansions, saying that we didn't need to have an expanded death penalty to have a safe commonwealth. I felt like I had been honest with people when I ran for governor that I was against the death penalty, that I would uphold existing law, but I didn't make any commitment to expand the use of the death penalty. And then we tried to make some other changes to Virginia law, especially how court-appointed attorneys are compensated, to make sure that in capital cases, poor defendants have really good defense, not slipshod defense. And actually that has ended up working out to significantly reduce the number of people going on to death row in Virginia. But that, I still, consider that a real, very, very, very difficult dilemma. And I hope when it's, weighed on Judgment Day that I did the right thing. But I struggled a lot with it and still do. I love the book of Genesis. One thing I love about the book of Genesis is that God says if you eat the apple, the punishment is death. But then God the Father decides in the first instance of mercy, okay, it's not going to be death, it's just going to be banishment. The loving and forgiving God appears in the very first chapter. Death is the punishment. Well, okay, I'm going to make an exception. I love the notion that we have a second chance God, and that appears in Genesis and throughout. I think the biggest environmental change we face is changing climate and human impact upon climate, I believe. And there's a good faith debate about what to do about it. But I personally believe that the science is overwhelming, that human beings are affecting climate, and that we do have a responsibility to do something about it. And so trying to find a set of strategies that will enable us to, lighten our effect upon the God's creation is the challenge of the age, I think, environmentally. And it's bigger than an environmental challenge. It's a national security challenge. It's a challenge that we're called to be with the least of these because of the effect of climate on drought and unusual weather events and storms. I mean, people are more vulnerable unless we figure out what to do. But we have to figure out what to do in a way that will not, overly harm an economy that's fragile, that's still recovering, that needs to recover stronger. So the questions about what to do, I think, are very, very challenging. I think the big one is for us to acknowledge that as human beings we should live in a way that respects the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, that respects our stewardship role and respects our responsibilities as parents of future generations, that we don't want to have our kids and grandkids live in a circumscribed environment because of our failure to do the right thing. The Democrats that I know are real values people. They're very religious people. And yet there is, I think, a little bit of the sense of you shouldn't pray loudly in front of the temple. There is some scriptural wisdom about not being too, put it out front. And I think that causes some people some concerns. I think also the traditions that we have in the country, that there is a churchly realm and a governmental realm, and there needs to be some space between them. That also affects people. But what I've always said to candidates, Democrats or others, share what motivates you. Share your motivations even before you share your policies, because people want to know your motivations to make a gauge of your authenticity. And for me, my motivation is a spiritual and religious one. One of the issues that sometimes trips folks up as they're wrestling with how, overt to be about their own religious inclinations is, I don't want to alienate someone. I don't want to be insensitive. I don't want to make somebody think I'm trying to proselytize them. I've had the experience in Virginia of going to too many events where it's a public event and then somebody gives a prayer at the start that is very explicitly Christian, and it alienates Jewish folks in the audience, or that alienates folks of other faiths. We can be inclusive as religious people without sacrificing any of our sincere beliefs, but we can do it in an inclusive way. And I think that's what we struggle with. I'm trying to run my campaign now in a way that's sort of true to who I am spiritually, but also to some spiritual realities of the moment. I think a spiritual reality in the moment right now is what would most people, Democrat, Republican, or Independent, say is their overwhelming impression of politics in August 2012? Negativity, negative TV ads, super PACs. It's negative. And the negativity ties in. You should be upset about this or that, or unhappy about this or that, or fearful about this or that. There's even more of a claim in this environment to be running a campaign that's not pie in the sky, but that's, hey, we're tough people. We've been through tough, and we know how to do tough. And our resources are large, not just dollars, but our resources of spirit are large. We can tackle any challenge we have. Trying to run a positive and optimistic and can-do campaign in the midst of negativity and cynicism and the super PACs stoking that, that's a spiritual thing. And I think it speaks to a spiritual need. And so, I don't know why people don't do what I do. I mean, I think everybody's got to do what they think is authentic to them. But the Democratic Party, if you look at who are reliable Democratic voters, so many of the blocks of reliable Democratic voters are deep faith and value constituencies. And I just think we should feel very free to be who we are,